Well, I've always liked the monster within idea. I like the zombies being us. It's like zombies are the blue-collar monsters.
Call of the Dead released March 17th of 2011 as the first zombies map to include a celebrity cast of playable characters, including Michael Rooker, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Danny Trejo, and Robert Englund, the OG horror villain. Most notably of all, though, for the first time ever, the map featured a boss antagonist who is none other than George Romero, the original Zombies movie director, famous for Night of the Living Dead, among other movie classics. Call of the Dead dropped monumentally, showing that Zombies was still not yet done growing. It was a bold and experimental map which took huge leaps in the series with both storyline and gameplay. Many fans and YouTubers alike claim this to be one of the greatest maps ever created. But it's also a map that has not been safe from criticism over the years either. Call of the Dead has some real flaws, and many players dislike this map because of them. It does a lot right, but it's certainly not perfect. And today we're going to be analyzing this map to see how good it really is. Is Call of the Dead an S-tier map like some claim, or are its many critiques justified? Today, we'll be figuring that all out. So welcome back, guys, to Zombies Retrospective, a weekly series in which we do a deep dive of your old favorite Zombies maps. If you are new here, please consider subscribing to help us reach 3 million subscribers. We're getting super close, but let's just get straight into it. Call of the Dead is first and foremost unique. There was never a map like it before, and there really hasn't been a map quite like it since. Bigger than even Ascension, this map weighs in at around 23.5 Nocturne Totens with 6 stories of verticality. But beyond size, there is a lot of content packed into this map as well. First of all, you have George, the constant, unyielding mid-boss round who will accompany you through this map until the very end. The map also has icy water, which can slow you down and freeze you if you stay in it too long. There is added mobility, zip lines, and the Flinger, a new perk, Deadshot Daiquiri. Not one, but 2 new unique wonder weapons. And also, not only does Call of the Dead bring these new things to the map, it actually removed a lot of things that fans had started to grow accustomed with to as permanents in the series. Call of the Dead has no traps, which seriously impedes high round attempts. There are no boss rounds or individual unique enemies at all. The map doesn't even have monkey bombs for that matter. You've also got weird reversals, like getting Pack-a-Punch is more simple than getting Jug. Call of the Dead shook up the Zombies formula to feel novel and fresh, but it didn't divert too much so as not to feel familiar. I think that is, in a sentence, why it is so beloved. And considering everything we just listed, I think it's also really important to note going into this that Call of the Dead is a challenging map. Like most Black Ops 1 maps, gameplay is at the forefront here, and the challenge is quite interesting. Its difficulty is different from other maps, and this is because it was the first time that the game developers managed to make something challenging while not simultaneously making it feel unfair. See, looking back, Noct was constrained, Verrückt was nonsensically fast, Jerice was glitchy, and 5 was just downright cruel at times. But for the first time, we see a map that managed to challenge the player, yet strike a fair balance. Starting things out, the Scavenger is a perfect example of how this map was designed. The Scavenger is an incredibly fun wonder weapon, but it doesn't scream broken. A smart player can be dangerously effective with it, but if you get cornered, you will likely die. Also, it stops being a one-shot kill in the 40s, which makes it hard for high rounds, but fair to the casual player. Compare this to the Winter's Howl, which stops in the 20s, and you can see how well balanced this gun is. And also, can I just remind you how cool the upgraded version sounds? Dude, the upgraded Scavenger evaporates zombies. And personally, I think it's the best designed wonder weapon up to this date in the series. There is one other wonder weapon though, and that's the VR11. Now, 95% of you probably agree with me on this when I say that the VR11 is absolute trash. But I do just want to take a moment to speak to the other 5% of you contrarians out there. I know the ideology here. Patrick, when you pack-a-punch the VR11, it can give your teammates insta-kill, and it's good for George and high rounds, and listen, stop. Please, for the love of God, stop. This is the Scavenger.
Not your day, is it, zombie? I actually live to see morning.
And this is the VR11.
You want to take your friends with you?
The Scavenger is big pee-pee. The VR11 is poo-poo. I don't know why the VR11 exists. It's pointless, and I hate it. But anyways, moving on. Even the enemies in this map pose a unique challenge. Something I think a lot of people forget to realize is this is the first zombies map to feature a significant amount of ground spawners, which can be incredibly dangerous. Pretty much every map before this had zombies either spawning in water or from barriers, and with this new feature, you think you're fine, but you can die super easily. All it takes is one unlucky spawn below you. Also, there are no boss rounds. Up until this point, boss rounds were historically short rounds, and without them in the map, it takes much longer to go a further amount of rounds. Later rounds really start to drag on, especially in 4-player, and on top of that, you're not even guaranteed a max ammo. And then, of course, lastly, you have George. Now, the primary function of George, it seems, was to discourage camping. And that certainly achieves its goals. But George also adds an extra level of chaos and difficulty to training, and that was something we had never seen before. George is kind of like the alpha version of Brutus and the Panzerschreck and Margwas, those mid-round bosses that spawn in and make everything crazy for a little bit. But with George, the option of chaos is actually put on the player. It's not random. This is because George will only get angry if you accidentally shoot him. This will momentarily slow you down and impair your vision, which makes it very, very easy to down. And on top of that, as he starts running, you now have an additional threat on your tail. George adds a constant level of tension to the map. You don't want to make him mad, and in order to not do so, you sometimes need to be surgically careful. One wrong shot at the wrong time can easily lead to a down. But the nice thing about George is he also adds a reward. Killing him gives you a free perk that this time cannot be taken away. George provides a long-term challenge that really benefits later rounds. Looking back to Ascension, I found myself lacking desire to progress into the later rounds, but George adds content to keep the player going. And everything I just mentioned on difficulty is only exacerbated by Call of the Dead being a large map with icy water, tight areas, and dead ends. Apart from the few select areas that we often tend to remember, most of the map is pretty close quarters. It's certainly not Verrückt level small, but a sort of right amount tight. Hallways are usually 2 units wide rather than 1, meaning you need to be careful, but it's not impossible to play the map safely. Walking through icy water can be dangerous, but you can also use these areas as effective shortcuts if need be. And of course, if a teammate is to go down, well, now you're in for a really big challenge. The map is incredibly large, and if you don't respond immediately, it's very likely your teammate is going to bleed out. So overall, this is a very hard map with challenging aspects, but this time, the game finally provides you with a chance to succeed. Now, shifting gears to atmosphere, Call of the Dead is not a beautiful map, but I think its setting really strikes a nice tone. Ascension felt devoid of color, and while Call of the Dead does the same, it feels more appropriate here. Maybe that's just the Canadian in me talking, but I feel like it gets away with a bad color scheme since its setting forces it to have one. Visually, the map also has some amazing structures. First and foremost, the lighthouse makes an incredible centerpiece to the map and also serves a nice function to show the location of Pack-a-Punch. The boats are a little boring, but they at least provide a different area from snow and water. And Call of the Dead also has fun little details, like, for example, zombies will crawl up the anchor chain near Mule Kick. It's little things like that that show you how Treyarch went above and beyond when making this map. Another often missed detail is the contrast of the perk machines. In the history of Call of Duty Zombies, I don't think there is a map that makes perk machines look as incredible as on Call of the Dead. You've got this bleak, dead, frozen wasteland, yet scattered around the map are these little pockets of hope. The colors of the perk machines stand out against the vast nothingness really well, and it always manages to make me appreciate them just a little bit more, especially Pack-a-Punch sitting in the water. Oh yeah, and this map also has a new perk. It's called Deadshot Daiquiri. Let's see here. It makes you shoot good. Interesting. But moving on, we've also got a great Easter egg. While Ascension's Easter egg was great at the time, looking back, it kind of feels like Weenie Hut Jr., where Call of the Dead steps it up, and this is an Easter egg that can still stand on its own today. It is quite simple with a world record solo run of only 7 minutes that involves flipping switches and locating bottles of vodka, but they are interesting steps. You're basically just assisting the main crew and getting the golden rod while they are stuck in a bunker. This dynamic makes for a really funny situation with some incredible dialogue. Also, a submarine pops out of the water at one step, and on top of that, you get an amazing reward for beating it. The Wonder Waff returns. And this also makes it so that every time you kill George from now on, you get the Waff instead of the death machine. I mean, I would have preferred if we just got to keep the Wonder Weapon rather than it expire, but it still is a nice touch. Plus, this is the first Zombies map to actually feature 4 Wonder Weapons, and despite one sucking, one being the ray gun, and one not really being permanents, I guess that's still kind of cool. So, with all that said, on paper, Call of the Dead really sounds like a solid map. It's got good gameplay, tons of new features, cool transportation, solid Wonder Weapons, and a fun Easter egg. It's got a lot of the ingredients to be an S-tier map, but despite all this, I just can't see how it would rival some of the more obvious greats. So I say this to everyone, but Lex especially, because I know you're watching this and I know you love Call of the Dead. It's a strong map, but there is no way it deserves a spot up with the greats. S-tier is a top tier, above and beyond. And in order to make it there, you gotta be truly special. Bring an insane amount of innovation to the table, be packed with new content, have compelling storyline, and do all this with few mistakes that detract from the experience. Call of the Dead is great, but it doesn't quite hit all of those keys. And so if it's not S-tier, then what is it? My biggest issues with Call of the Dead share a very common theme that I see throughout all of Black Ops 1 Zombies. Every Black Ops 1 map has these small features that could have been easily changed, which prevent the map from being all that it could. These are the growing pains of Black Ops 1 that really hold the game back as a whole. For example, in our Kino retrospective, I highlighted my gripes with the weapon mechanics of the game and how most guns don't have enough ammo to be useful. But there are also little things related to each and every map. 5 has a terrible wonder weapon, but it could have been fine if they just made it kill for longer. Ascension's monkeys are a nightmare to deal with in solo, but could have been easily fixed. And besides maybe Moon, there is nowhere I see these little issues more than on Call of the Dead. It's these tiny little features, these tiny little developer choices that, once stacked upon each other, and game after game played, really build up and detract from the game overall. So first of all, you know we gotta talk about the fog. As I went on and on about how okay this map can look, I'm sure you were all thinking about the fog. So yeah, 50% of the time, this map looks thematically appropriate, for sure. But the other 50% of the time, well, it doesn't really look like anything at all. It's just gray. See, the fog is actually a great idea that makes sense given the location. The problem with it, however, is that you can't make it go away. It just comes and goes as it pleases. Forever. There is nothing you can do about it, and you're just simply punished to look at gray for no reason. The fog is the biggest issue with the map, and the reason it bothers me so much is, again, how it was implemented. It's not the feature as a whole, but it's the way it was implemented. And like a lot of things with Call of the Dead, I think there is a really easy solution to make the fog work on this map. See, with starting matches, it's already perfect. When you spawn in, the map is fully lit for a brief second, but then as George spawns in, it goes gray. This shows you what the map can look like, but then takes it away from you and kind of almost attributes it to the fault of George. From here though, I think it needs to change. The fog should be permanent until you turn on power. And from here, the lighthouse and other lights turn on, and this should partially lift the fog. Or maybe not lift the fog, but make the map brighter, make you be able to see a little bit more. See, total grayness would actually work more effectively in those early rounds, but I just think it would be so satisfying to have players turn on power and get like a 50% boost in visibility, but not a full boost in visibility as you saw when you first spawned in. No, see, if you want to go full visibility, why not make it so upon killing George for the first time, the map is bright for the rest of the game? This would only add to the satisfaction in beating him and actually give you control over the weather. Seeing nothing but gray time and time again sucks. I don't like it, and it takes away from an otherwise visually appealing map. I think giving players the control to permanently remove fog would have made the map significantly more enjoyable. But Call of the Dead also has some other serious flaws beyond visuals. The map is poorly laid out, and it doesn't have enough mobility. Call of the Dead is not only massive, but there are many one-way paths, and because of this, you're often forced to do a lot of walking. Sometimes you're staring at the place you want to go, but there will be a gate in the way, so you have to go all the way around to move what was only 5 feet. While I appreciate the awareness that Treyarch brought with the ziplines and flinger, there simply aren't enough of them. And on top of that, they're not even really placed in great spots. Like the top of the lighthouse, for example. Yeah, it's a nice way to escape, but how often is that actually a practical way to use to get around the map? A lot of the time, getting around Call of the Dead is a hassle and a chore. And even on that note, there's just some things that aren't placed in good locations. Take Jug, for example. Now, it makes sense to have a non-necessary perk like, say, Mule Kick over there, but I just don't understand why they had to put Jug that far away. From spawn, it takes 7 doors to open it, which is just really tedious, especially having to continually go back there to get it over and over. So the mobility additions do help the flow of Call of the Dead, but they are nowhere near enough to make up for what is otherwise a poorly laid out map. But of course, finally, this retrospective would not be complete without a George hate piece. Now, I will be open. I am in the camp of people who like George, but I can understand why he isn't unanimously a beloved boss. But instead of going on about his flaws, I think it will be better to look at how he could have been improved. So I think the biggest issue people have with George is that he never goes away. Round 1, round 80, it doesn't matter. He's there. And even when you kill him, he's coming back an extra round. This is why he's annoying, and this is why players hate him. They just need some time alone. So this leads me to thinking that maybe Call of the Dead would have benefited from George not having to spawn back once you beat him. Imagine if he was like the Ender Dragon from Minecraft, which, oh, by the way, have you subscribed to Nifty Smith, my new Minecraft channel yet? Link in the description. But flawless transitions aside, what I'm getting at is imagine a Call of the Dead where George is exactly as he is until you kill him. In this remake, imagine that he doesn't come back, and if you wish it, he can be gone for the rest of your run. That would give players the space that they so desperately crave, but would also limit ambitious players from being able to get perks. So I think a workaround with this is the Ender Dragon idea, where let's say you can also go to a certain area of the map, do X, Y, and Z steps, and boom, this makes him respawn. So this would allow players to continue to get reward perks if they choose to do so, but it would also make it so that jaded players get some distance from the big guy. Really, I can't see how this hurts the map in any way, and I think it would honestly only serve to improve it. George can be exhausting, and the map loses a lot from never providing the player with a true break from him. So Call of the Dead is certainly far from perfect. As is, it's not an S-tier map, But even with these changes made, I don't think it deserves that. It would certainly make it closer to being one, but I just don't think Call of the Dead has the innovation, storyline, or deep gameplay to put itself in that tier. I mean, really, how great are the characters on this map? Sure, as actors, they're super cool, and they were only given a single map to be flushed out, but I just don't think these 4 had the lasting effects like some of the other characters we get to see. They aren't remembered like the one-off greats, such as JFK, Sal DeLuca, Al Arlington, or Jessica Rose. And while the gameplay is incredibly sound, it still suffers from an imperfect layout and bad visuals a lot of the time. And I don't say these things to be intentionally critical, but more so just to be objective and as impartial as possible. I think there is an argument to be made that Call of the Dead is the best Black Ops 1 map, and I personally feel that way. It's got great replayability, and to me, it really feels like the first full map. You can go for 8 perks, do the Easter egg, or just have a fun time casually with your friends. Call of the Dead has a lot of content to offer, and if you dislike this map, I encourage you to try and give it another chance. Look past your issues with George in the Fog and see it for what the rest of it is. Call of the Dead is a tried and true, legitimate zombies experience that, even to this day, manages to stand up to the greats. And while it's not one itself, it does a damn good job. My final rating for Call of the Dead is, and just to clarify, here is my tier rating system. There was some confusion in the last video, but it's not meant to be a school grading system. There's just high A's and low A's, and I thought I'd call them A pluses and A minuses, and I confused you guys, so I'm sorry about that. I tried to relate our out of 10 system to a tier rating system. So anything above a 9 is an S, A is an 8, and so on. And anyways, this is our scale for the rest of the series. While it isn't one itself, it does a damn good job. My final rating for Call of the Dead is an 8.6 out of 10.